All right, good morning. Looks like everyone's in and settled, and we've balanced a little more the weight of the room, so I don't feel like I have to stand only on this side. So my name is Nathan Hegan. I'll be moderating the panel today, and I hope that you brought with you some questions for our veteran, for our actors, for the writer, and for the grandson of one of the characters that you're going to see, one of the veterans you're going to see in a clip that I'm going to play. So it's a privilege for us to be able to do this 20th anniversary Band of Brothers. And have you all seen it, or at least a little bit of it? No one's like, what is it? I've never seen it before. Okay, so you all have a sense of what we're going to be talking about and how these individuals were involved. And it was 20 years ago, and some months now, we were supposed to do this last year, that Band of Brothers came out. And I don't even think these guys knew what was ahead of them when it was released or when it was in production. And I remember I was a classroom teacher once. I showed it to students that I had in my classes. And it really brought a sense of the war to them, seeing the younger faces. And so who we have on our panel, I'll have them introduce themselves in a little bit, but we have George McAlpin, who's a veteran of World War II, of the Battle of the Bulge, Shane Taylor, who played Doc Rowe, Chris Langlois, who's Doc Rowe's grandson, Bruce McKenna, a writer, and Rene Moreno, who also starred in Band of Brothers. So most of this is going to be you guys getting a chance to ask questions. And what I want to do first is George traveled with us in 2019, December, on the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. And it was his chance to go back, see the places where he served. And George, if you just want to stand up or wave to be acknowledged, and if we could give him a round of applause. So we're going to start with George's stories in just a little bit, but I realized when we put this panel together, it was almost accidental that it became a Battle of the Bulge panel. And are you familiar at all with what the Battle of the Bulge was and its significance? Just a nod or wave or something is good. So it's December 1944. Ever since the breakout from Normandy in August of that year, things have gone pretty rapid. And in December, the Germans had mounted one last-ditch final mega assault. And you'll see where it's called the Battle of the Bulge. You see the dark red line on your right, and then that lighter red line that goes around on your left, that's the Bulge. So when people talk about the Battle of the Bulge, there is your Bulge. And that little circle in the middle is Bastogne. And so when we're talking a siege of Bastogne, that circle, that blue circle, is the Americans holding out. And there's actually a book called, people think of this like the Alamo, there's a book that's actually called Alamo in the Ardennes, talking about the area around Bastogne and sections into Clairvaux, in which groups were Americans were making last stands and delaying tactics to keep the Germans from this. But you can hear this from me, but what I'd like to do is have George give us his experience in Bastogne, and he got there before the 101st Airborne did. And I want to have George tell a little bit of what it was like for him.
Well, actually, is this on, or can you hear me all right? Huh? Okay, well, we had been in Luxembourg since early October. It was at that time a quiet front, limited road networks and whatnot, and so it was really a place where you kind of had this tendency to forget that there was a war going on. Although I was in a combat engineer battalion, we reverted back to running sawmills and rock crushers and doing road repairs and that sort of thing. And then actually there came a time about the middle of December when our colonel decided, you fellas are getting rusty. You haven't built a Bailey Bridge in a long time, and I think we really need to practice. So on the 13th of December, A Company went to this location and built this specified Bailey Bridge in 2 hours and 27 minutes. The next day, the 14th, B Company went, and they were a little bit slower. They were a little over 2 hours and 30 some odd minutes. December the 15th, C Company, which of course was the prime company all the time, we were building the bridge and we're not quite finished when a farmer drove up in his truck and said, there are 5 German soldiers eating at my farmhouse. We said, well, that's certainly not nice. So a half a dozen of us jumped in the truck, went on down there. One of our braver boys busted in the door. These 5 Germans were in nice, clean uniforms and were put up no resistance at all. And then it turned out the next day, we picked them up, took them back, handed them over to some MPs, military police, and they just took them on to a prisoner of war camp someplace. Well, we thought nothing more of it until the next day, the 16th of December. Oh, the 16th was a little bit different. We were awakened at dawn by heavy artillery fire, and it suddenly dawned on us, those Germans yesterday knew what was going to happen today, and they wanted to get as far away from here as they possibly could. And so they knew then what was going on. So that was the 16th that we were awakened and heard artillery fire all day. The 17th, we were ordered to go up to Bastogne, which was 8th Corps headquarters, and set up a perimeter defense there. And we then established a line just east of Bastogne, and were there the 17th, 18th, and 19th until we were relieved. I'll always remember it. These fellas showed up just about dark and said, we're from the 101st Airborne Division, and we're here to relieve you. We thought about that for a minute and said, thank you and goodbye.
Let's have a chance to ask George more questions, but I want to recognize sitting in the front, Rich Thacker and Barrington Irving, who are responsible for getting George here, flew him in private this morning, getting a chance for George to come and tell you their stories. So thanks so much, guys. So now we're going to move it on to George brings us right up to the 101st arriving. And now we'll go into the Bastogne episode that will give you, I think, a clearer sense of who these individuals are.
Sergeant Garnier, did you keep your morphine from Holland?
No. Hey, Doc, I gotta talk to you.
How's that leg?
And the hell with the leg, I'm pissing needles.
Later. You seen him?
No. They're out there. Depend on it. Have a job, Doc?
Go on. I need scissors. You got scissors? Sharp scissors.
Scissors? Well, let's see. I'll have to check the sewing room. Might be upstairs in the study, that skinny old drawer in the middle of the desk.
All right. What about an extra syringe in your aid kit, huh?
How'd your morphine, guy?
I'm good. They peppered my helmet. They knocked out. Morphine. Here, take it. Where's my collar? Christ knows. You guys hit? Hey, you crazy? What are you looking at him for? Watch the goddamn line. You got a syringe? Go. They got out! It's the artery, I feel it! They got it! Go! Goddamn artery! They got it! goddammit! Loosen him now!
Bleed to death.
Relax your arm, paper. Come on. It's not the artery.
I ain't going back, Doc.
What?
I ain't going nowhere, not this shit.
You don't want to go out in this shit and you yell a medic?
I don't need to go back to no aid station.
Well, you're in luck, McDonald. You don't got no aid station.
Pincala, scissors. I need scissors. You got scissors?
What the hell I need scissors for?
Got your aid kit? Right, well, you don't need this. Not yet. I do.
All right, so with that,
Oh, youth. Youth.
You do your own stunts in that thing.
which anniversary are we commemorating here? So we'll go
Creepy
with
business.
just kind of down the line here. We'll start with Shane, and they're going to explain who they are and how they got involved in this whole thing.
Well, I'm Shane. I'm Shane Taylor. I played Doc Rowe, this man's grandfather. I had the very real pleasure of not being in Bastogne. Yeah, my way into it, I had no idea. It was just a thing going around in the industry. I was in London at the time. As you can hear, I'm not from these shores.
You're not from Louisiana with
Not
that
from
accent.
Louisiana, no. And but this thing came up, and it was this World War II project that was going on. Of course, everybody knows Spielberg and Hanks, and so we knew that it wasn't going to be a small affair. But we all, and Rene will mention this, I'm sure, we all ended up having to have these initial auditions and interviews. But it didn't stop at one, and I've never known this to be. It was such a meticulously, I think they must have seen everybody in everywhere, probably. So I ended up having about, 6 or 7 meetings. But interestingly enough, and we read for so many roles, nobody really knew. They were looking around, they were trying to work out physical resemblance and just mixing and matching combinations. So I read for a lot of roles, but Doc came up early, and Rowe was always somebody I was reading, maybe it was a Spears I was given a monologue of, or Nixon, but Rowe was always part of that. So every time I went in, I got a sense of something happening here. And also, I just liked, selfishly, I liked the idea of somebody trying to save lives in a theatre of war. You know, there was a real appeal. But I didn't really know much about the guy. But we went on, and it ended up, as these things tend to happen, the further you get down the line, the more people end up being in the room, and you know you're getting somewhere. And then as an actor, you start to feel something happening. You feel like you're doing something that's making the right impression, and that breeds confidence, not overconfidence. It just gives you a sense of, okay, I'm on the right lines, and keep calm, you know. And for me, personally, it culminated in Hyde Park in London. There was a big, lavish hotel called the Athenaeum. And Tom Hanks was there with Tony Toe, his producer who directed one of the episodes, a whole bunch of people. But he was in his castaway mode, and I don't know if you remember that castaway look. So I didn't really recognize him. He looked like a homeless Santa. And so you know, I ended up at this point. I'm doing the medic. You know, I'm doing Doc, and I can vividly remember I'm miming having a medic's bag, and I'm doing the scene, and he very carefully came over. He had a sort of satchel bag anyway, and he just slipped this bag to me as I was sort of doing the scene, and I got hold of it and started to carry on. And I think it was the idea of, let's see if this guy can just work with props, not bump into furniture, and then give him a mark after that. So, as I say, at that point, when you've got a real sense of something going your way, not necessarily you've got it wrapped up, but you feel like good about it. As nervous as I was, and I was nervous for everything, you know, every meet, you channel it in the right ways, and I think the fearlessness of youth, probably, Rene, would you say? you know, you get over it and you get out and you do it and you get out. And I think I walked the streets of London aimlessly for the next 3 hours. You know, it was just I was buzzing from the thing, but you know, there were so many people being seen for all the roles that you just didn't really know. But what I did feel like I knew is that I did what I could, and then, you know, you just got to leave it as an actor. You just got to leave it and somehow shed that skin and go on. And I don't know how long it took, but you know, fortunately, I got it, and I can remember the call actually. I was on the road. I was driving. I was on the road, and my agent called up, and this is a typical agent's response. No appreciation of history, I felt. I mean, she called me up, and I was really broke at the time. I was an out of work actor. So it was, she said, pull over, we've got some news. And her words, she said, oh yeah, what is it? She went, yeah, you're rich. Which is not the truth, because I mean they looked after us, but I mean I was just a broke actor with nothing, and suddenly, you know, you're going to get a little money for doing something you trained. Yeah, you're a broke actor that's going to be doing. But of course, you know, we had to go to boot camp. That was part of the deal. And I don't know how far you want me to go with this, Nathan, but the idea was, I think it was Meg Lieberman who was the chief casting director behind this, and HBO. I was actually doing for Peanuts, I was doing this after-dinner theatre. I was doing a play. But going to boot camp meant that I had to get out of that play because it was clashing, you know. So there was a little bit of a political thing going on there, but HBO ended up buying me out of this play so I could go to boot camp. And when boot camp was so important in our experience, wasn't it, Rene?
I didn't go.
What do you mean you didn't go? Get off this stage. Oh, see,
My story's next.
Oh, okay. But yeah, it helped. But you know, once the role was, you know, once I got the role, it was a case then of just kind of, you know, getting the research. HBO were brilliant at the production materials, leads to family numbers, and email addresses. You obviously do your own thing. Unfortunately, Doc himself had passed away a couple of years before I did the role, so I didn't have the man to talk to, but I had plenty of the company around, and that was good. And that's the thing. It's like you couldn't make the same thing now, even if you tried to. I mean, our access to the vets back then was just part of the you know, the treasure trove, really, of the time. And this man, Bruce, the writer of Bastogne, I mean, I was just blown away by the script, and it was one of those immediate things where I'm looking at it, and I didn't really know the real man. Obviously, I'm just looking at the script, and I'm immediately having this image of the possibilities, and it was a real joy to. I'm not just saying because he's here. I haven't seen Bruce for years, but it was so nice to have a moment, because I think it was a very smart move.
Can you start over? I want to record.
Well, I will be brief just to pass it on, but it was a nice moment for obviously for me as an actor to have that kind of scene, that kind of episode given over to a medic's perspective. But I think it was a smart departure from HBO as well. You know, you have that time for the real shellacking, as they say in the Bulge in the next episode, but to actually see it through a medic's eyes, which at the time I hadn't seen done before, and I don't think it really had been done. Had it, Bruce? So I thought it was smart. There was time for everything, and I think the double Bulge episode really complemented each other, I think. And yeah, and we felt really, really proud of it. But I didn't really meet you. This is Chris, he's the grandson. We didn't meet until probably after in Normandy. Yeah, you want to take it from there?
So there I was.
So yeah.
My name's Chris Langlois, and I have a cool Cajun name because I'm from Baton Rouge. Go Tigers. And so unlike these guys here who have talent and have accomplished something, I was just born. Luckily, the grandson of Doc Rowe. And so the funny thing about the history, and for you kids who look sharp in your ties, good job. The history that you don't know is what you don't know. And so I was a sophomore, junior at LSU, and came home on a Sunday to get mom's cooking and my clothes washed, as a good college student does. And my mom handed me the book, Band of Brothers, and she said, you know, your grandfather jumped on D-Day. Now, in college, besides beer and women, there's not much else going on, at least back in my day. So needless to say, I didn't care about anything about World War II or that my grandfather jumped on D-Day. But being a good student, as you are, when you're given a topic and you need to know something, you turn to the back. Y'all still have books? I mean, we had books back then. Y'all have the internet. We had books. You had to hold something. And there's an index in the back. And so I went to my grandfather's name, Roe, and he's on 3 pages. 3 pages. Now, if you're on 3 pages of a book about World War II, my thought was you hadn't done anything. Because had you done something in a war, you would have done something more than 3 pages worth. That ended up being 3 paragraphs. So I read those very quickly and handed the book back to my mom. And I thought, obviously, he didn't do anything in the war. And unbeknownst to me, my grandfather is the only medic in Easy Company that landed on D-Day and went all the way through the war to Hitler's Eagle's Nest. So he is the only medic that made it all the way through the war. Was never seriously wounded. And he literally saw every man in that company who was hurt or killed. So I did not know what I did not know. And so here comes Shane, emailing my aunt. I'm playing your grandfather, whatever. You know, he talks funny. It's hard to believe him. They invite us at the very last minute to Normandy in June of 2001. And I check in. A bunch of us came, a bunch of the family, 12, 13 of us, and we get to Normandy in France. And I said, we're here with the Rowe family, and the girl's like from HBO. She's like, oh, you're gonna love episode 6. It's all about your grandfather. And I go, why would it be about my grandfather? I didn't know what I didn't know. What I didn't know is these guys had done the research and knew more about my grandfather than I did. And so my grandfather, I knew nothing about running around the snow in Bastogne. He was a cowboy. He wore cowboy boots and cowboy hat. He drove a pickup truck, and he drove bulldozers and backhoes and loaded dirt and sand and gravel into pickup trucks and built roads around South Louisiana. That's what I knew. So what these guys did when they were not much older than you was just something we didn't know about. And so for you guys, I will tell you that we're losing these World War II veterans. They won't be here much longer, but there was other experiences and other veterans, and I hope that you'll seek those guys out and gals and learn their stories before they're gone, so that you're not Chris Langlois in college and worry about beer and girls, and you miss out on the chance to learn about your own families.
College. Same.
College. We could drink at 18 in Louisiana back then, so we started a little earlier than everybody else. So that's my story, and so I'm very, very, very proud of my grandfather. I'm very proud of this man's portrayal, and I tell him all the time that he gave me my father. He gave me my grandfather in a lot of ways, and so that's why we're here to honor these guys.
Well, you ruined my joke, because I'm going to say you paid me $100 to write about your grandfather.
Oh, that check's going to bounce.
No, it's good to see you. I mean, it's. I wrote the episode. It was the episode that no other writer wanted, and so I got on Band of Brothers by begging. I heard about it. It was a lot of us on the show, the writers. We were younger, and you know, I begged. I just wanted to write on it because I'd always been a World War II sort of freak, but not from the standpoint of the maps and the. I still don't know how many guys are in a platoon, or I don't know anything about that stuff. I was always interested in what it meant morally for young men and women to experience war. I don't know if you guys know, but World War II is the largest event in the history of the world. It's the largest social event in human history. 100 million people, everybody involved, all over the world. It's enormous. You could literally tell the story of Band of Brothers with the same men in the same company and do a completely different miniseries and never have a scene repeat itself. So for me, it was about finding a character and a way to tell that enormous story through one person's experience. That's what dramatists do. We sort of try and find something that somebody experiences that's universal, that people like you know, young men and women would understand. And so I'm actually the guy that picked Ro to do an episode, and I was told not to. Can't do him, he's not one of our main guys. And then when I explained to the production that he's the only character that touches everybody else, they got it. And so we decided to focus on Eugene. And I never met him, and I didn't meet Chris until Normandy, but I did a lot of research on Louisiana, a lot of research on Cajun culture, and a lot of research on medics and what they went through. And everybody in the company, I interviewed almost everybody in the company, had the same thing to say about Eugene, that he was, quote, an angel, end quote. And that original title of the episode was Angels from Above, and which is what the airborne was called by the Europeans, because they came and rescued them from the swastikas that you saw on the map. But so I just did a lot of research and then tried to tell the story of what it really means to go to war. You know, it's not just about killing, it's about suffering and pain and sacrifice, and it's hard. And so I want to make sure that, you know, people like you would understand that when you watch the show, because it can be a little, you know, it's a patriotic show, and it should be, but people suffered in that war, including there's a nurse in the show that I don't know for a fact that Eugene talked to her, but he must have. She's a real character. She really existed. Both nurses in the episode of episode 6. There was a Belgian Congolese girl who was there, who was a very good nurse, and then Rene Moreno, who was a Belgian girl, who was 18 years old. And so I was able to get women into Band of Brothers. There's only a couple in the show, and which made me very proud, and you know, because it is a show about suffering, this episode in particular. And, you know, it was a great experience, and it was an enormous privilege to be able to represent guys like George and what they went through. And, you know, and medics are a unique breed because they don't kill, they save. And so that's my story. And it was a great honor, and it's great to see your young faces. I was your age when I was 17. My junior year essay was The Common Soldier in World War II. And I interviewed a B-26 pilot. I researched a reporter, and then my milkman, who was a German paratrooper who fought against Easy Company, not only on the beaches of Normandy, but in Holland. So to get his experience from the German point of view was really interesting. So I really started working on this when I was your age, essentially. But that's me.
How you guys doing? My name is Rene Moreno. I play Joseph Ramirez, Private Joseph Ramirez. My way into this show was, wow, pure luck. Seriously, I was a carpenter. I was working as a handyman at the time. Still acting, still doing little things here and there in Los Angeles. And I was the last American from the core group of actors that was cast in the show. So I did not go to boot camp. Yeah, that was another story. Here I go, I walk into this table read with all these actors who had just come back from boot camp, and they're all congratulating each other, going, yeah, we did this, we pulled through, we're friends, we're, you know, this common thread. I walk in, I had long hair, and I'm like, oh boy. I'm in for something. I don't know what it is, but I'm into something that I don't know if I want. You know, the whole process of getting into this show was unlike Shane, where he actually got to interact with the producers, you know, Tom and Tony and all them. I had to go in and act in front of a camera all the time, and just with the casting directors. So there was about a month of going back and forth into this room and just reading Joe Toy's lines, Rose lines, Spears lines, and just going back and forth and not knowing what I was doing and what I was getting myself into. Garcia's lines. So there was all these different roles that we were reading, and that's something that Tom and Steven and Tony, and they were just trying to see who fit in what, and that's what it was. And I, being not Caucasian, was not part of the core group of, what? I'm not Caucasian. There's a couple characters in there that, Garcia, you got Ramirez, and you had the cook. I forgot his name. No, it wasn't. Anyways, those three were the non-whites. That's how they were categorized. And so I was going to fall into one of those three, so I didn't know which one I was going to get. But I just kept on going back to this, auditioning room and meeting with Meg and Angela and just getting these tapes. And this was way before, we had like Zoom meetings or whatnot. It was just these tapes that were being flown back and forth to to London and back, And finally, I remember this. I was at a client's house. I was in the attic putting, a flooring down into an attic, and I get the call, and they're like, yeah. So they want to offer you this role. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm thinking in my head, I got maybe a week of work. Awesome. Yeah, you're going to be going for about 19 weeks, and then they're going to let you go for a couple weeks, and then you're going to go back for another 9 or 10 weeks. And then I'm like, what? I just bought a house, and I had gutted it. And my fiance at the time, we had nothing. It was just a house with, it was the dirt yard on the neighborhood, So, and I told her, and she was like, "You're seriously asking me if you want to take this job? Go. What are you doing?" The thing is, I had to leave in 24 hours. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll take it. Yeah, all right. I didn't care what it was paying. I was going to do it. So that night, we just got friends together, said goodbye, and the next morning, I took off. It's Thursday. I get there Friday morning, go straight to the table read, and I meet all these guys, and everybody's like, you're in for it, because Garnier's going to eat you alive. And I'm like, who's Garnier? I have no idea. And I'm just like, I have no idea everybody's just talking. We're reading the first 2 episodes. Nothing else has been written about anything. I mean, for me at least. I didn't even know who my character really was, because I didn't do any research. I just read the book on the flight in. And I just read 2 lines of Ramirez, and I was like, all right, cool. He had character. He actually chickened out from jumping out of the plane, and then he told the pilot to fly back because he has to jump out or else he's not going to get his wings. Wow, that took a lot. Being alone on the plane, going, go back, I got to jump so I could be with the guys. Or else he would be just general infantry, and he didn't want that. So he disappeared out after the war, so I had no research, no nothing of my character, no family members to talk to, nothing. All I had were the living veterans who I got to know and talk to about this guy. And all they said was, yeah, good soldier, quiet. Hence, no lines. Always there, good soldier. But yeah, it was
great with a knife.
And very good.
You became really handy.
But yeah, I just remember one of these first days on set, and we're just waiting for filming to begin. Shane and I were walking along the B-52s, the cutouts and the 2 real ones, and we're just walking out the field, just talking, and I just remember going, "Wow, this is surreal. Feels good. It's surreal, but it feels good." And we were just talking about who we were, and we all talked to each other in our names. I was always Ramirez. He was always Doc, Leapka, everybody. That's who we were. We weren't, I wasn't Rene. It wasn't Shane. We were our people. And that's who we are. And that's who we are to this day. That's how we refer to each other. And it's just a testament to all the writing, because this show is based on the character of these gentlemen. I mean, these are kids. I mean, you got to keep in mind, these guys were 18, 17, 19. It's crazy to think what they did at that time. And that's something that it's mind-blowing to me to this day. So, George, every time I meet veterans, I'm just like, yeah. I mean, seriously, newfound. At that time, I was like, Chris, I was like, what, World War II? All right, yeah, all right. But after the series, what it did to me, it humbled me. It made me respect our history. And we should never forget that. That's for sure. So, yeah, and I think this whole story, because of the characters, the love for one another, I think that's what made this series so special. It's very visceral at times, but it's more about the love that these guys had for each other that made it special. And I think it shows, because we all had that same kind of relationship throughout the whole series. And it is amazing. So, I mean, that's how I got involved. I got lucky. I so got lucky.
You all got lucky.
Yeah.
There are two camps here. There are the great men,
yes,
and then the not so great pretenders.
Exactly.
So at this point, does anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask the panels? What I'll do, just raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone to you, and you can ask a particular person on stage or just in general.
George, can I ask you what made you want to join the Army back in the war?
The question is, what made you want to join the Army back in...
The draft board.
Good choice. Good choice.
Well, at that time, the population of the United States was only 130 to 135 million people, and there were over 16 million that were in the armed forces during World War II. So that's like almost 1 in every 8 people in the country was in the Army. So it wasn't like as if, oh, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. They said, you will. As long as you pass the entrance exam, you're in.
Good question.
I have a question for, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, the one in the red shirt.
Shane.
Okay.
Hey.
Hi, Shane. I'm Minnie. I have a question from one of my students. They want to know, how was boot camp for you, and what exactly did y'all do there?
Yeah. Well, boot camp, I think boot camp served its purpose. It was tough. But it was actor tough. It wasn't soldier tough. I mean, they couldn't afford to be that tough. We had a few injuries, but we were put through it physically. It was a slow build and a slow burn for where we started on day 1 to day 10, and it was brilliantly logistically planned with promotions with some of the officers. But I keep thinking Rene's there. He's not. We sort of started out 5 a.m. I think it was a 3 to 5 mile run. I mean, luckily a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us were kind of sporty enough, or we knew what was coming, so we trained up before we went in to handle that. But there were field exercises all the time. There was so the core cast went, and then we had what they call special ability extras that had served, and they looked the part, and they helped us. The cadre, led by Captain Dale Dye, who's with us on this trip, were incredible. I mean, they would tear strips out of us. I mean, we were numbered turds for a while, but they had this brilliant way of being able to undercut that with humor. I mean, they're funny guys, so it sort of balanced it out. And I never really felt intimidated. I think it was just you just went with it. You knew what you were in for. You just went with it, and as long as you did that, I think you kind of got through it. But you hit walls, and then you try and get through them. And there was a whole German platoon, or a couple of platoons, on camp that we didn't even see until there was an operation, a task to do, and then suddenly you'd see Nazis coming out of everywhere, firing upon us. And then because of what I did, I would have to, with the cadre, they would teach me how to dress and teach me about capillary bleeding, venous bleeding, arterial bleeding. I would have my classroom medic time and work out how to put a syringe in and do a musette bag drag and all this kind of stuff. So it was very, the organization, as I say, logistic organization was just second to none. But moreover, and I think the most important thing about the boot camp aspect was that it brought us all together. There's no way that you couldn't work as a unit, as a team, to get through everything. And that was the adhesive juice that we all needed to then carry on into the shoot. By the time day one of the shoot came around, we were pretty tight, and helping each other. There was no way that you could have ego about it and be the actor star type thing. You couldn't. And that was a healthy position to be in. I don't think it would have been the same without having a boot camp, if that answers it.
Yeah. So how many push-ups?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a good little story on that one. So I didn't go to boot camp again. So I had to actually kind of prove myself to these guys. The first day there, of course, I had to get my hair cut. It was like shocking because I had long hair, and then I had to look like Shane. I was like shaved. Had to get my wardrobe done. I got my rifle. I called it a gun. Never do that ever in front of everybody else. That was my mistake. Because that night, all the Americans, we all got together and we're like, okay, let's go have dinner. Let's dress up. Let's go to a nice restaurant. Let's hang out before we start shooting. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't know anybody really, and so it was a good time for me to go actually meet all these guys. And here I am with Neil McDonough, Frank John Hughes, Ron Livingston, all these guys, and I'm just like kind of like in awe because these guys have been on, I want to be like them, and I'm like, oh my God. And we're sitting around this table. We're in Piccadilly Circus, Central London, and at this like 5-star restaurant. And we're all dressed. We all have nice suits on and whatnot. And we're going around the table just talking. And they were like, so how was your first day? And I'm like, yeah, it was great. I got to shoot my gun. And as soon as I said that, I felt this like silence throughout the whole table. And Compton, he goes, what did you just say? And it's Neil McDonough, blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, dead stare in my face, going, what did you just say? And I said, I shot my gun. And he's like, drop and give me 20. I'm looking around the table going, right. Oh, he's serious. And I'm looking at Frank John Hughes, Garnier, he's like, just matter of fact. I look at Ron Livingston, who's kind of like the normal, sane kind of guy. And he's like, yeah, you got to do it. And I'm looking around going, waiters all around. I'm like, get up, take off my jacket. I drop and give him 20 in front of this 5-star restaurant. Everybody's just looking at me like, and I'm like, well, he's my lieutenant. I got to do what I got to do. I just give him 20. Sit back down. He goes, all right, never say gun again. I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. From that moment on, it was good. I started to prove myself.
Is it because you didn't say weapon?
I didn't say weapon.
Right.
Yeah, I said gun. Never say gun. Because a gun is a gun. Rifle's your weapon. Yeah. But I was able to learn how to dismantle and put that M1 together under a minute. So, yeah. So
you were the quickest, I think.
Yeah, at one point, yeah. One point.
So, you don't know this, but I was there the day you got there with your long hair,
Oh,
and you guys got back from boot camp, and you were dressed in your uniforms for the first time.
Yeah.
And this table read.
Oh,
And they strutted in, these guys. You've never seen a more arrogant, snotty group of actors in your life. They were like strutting in. They had their caps on, their bloused boots, and their oh my God. Just cock of the walk, all of them. And I got on my phone and I called the other writers and I said, we have a show. I remember saying that.
God.
I don't know who he was. I said, we got this hippie on the show. It was a great
it was
moment.
intimidating. I mean, it was intimidating. I walk into this table read, everybody's just like high-fiving each other. I'm like, I'm out of place. I'm in the wrong place.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to have more questions.
Okay, so it's all the actors. How cold was it actually when you were filming?
It was hot. It was hot. We have these wool.
It was inside.
It was inside an airplane hangar, and it was hot. All that was fake snow, digitized breathing. It was hot.
If you can imagine between takes, it's like in a sauna for us. So we're being electric fans just kept coming into us, toweling us off, and I mean the only thing, we just had a little red sheen thing put on our nose,
and they didn't want us to take off anything because it would mess up continuity. So we had to keep things on.
But that was always the note. I think that was always the chief note from the directors, just to keep the cold, because George will know, the conditions were not great, and many perished to it, not just to the enemy. So keeping that real sense of whatever it was you were doing in the scene, had to be there. It had to be there all the time, and but it's difficult. It was also the hardest thing. I think that was the hardest thing, to maintain that and play the scene, because you don't want it to become everything about it, and you're focusing too much on it, but it had to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
There was one time also, we were all shooting on a tarmac, and there's like 4 or 5 cameras, right? I mean, just shooting everybody's marching, and it's us. I mean, they want to see everybody marching, and not just, special ability extras, background extras, but all the members of Easy Company who are going to be featured, who are going to be part of the show, to be marching, because that's what the company was, right? And here I am, I didn't go to boot camp. I didn't have this mentality just yet. And I'm walking, and I'm like, what the? I'm just paid to be an extra. I'm just moaning, and I'm just not there. And Bull, he goes, what the, in so many words, what are you thinking? You're an actor. You're getting paid to be an actor. Where else would you be right now? This is HBO. We're doing something special. What are you going to be doing if you're back in Los Angeles right now? And that just put me in my place as an actor. I was like, oh my God, I'm an actor, you're right. And this is what I'm doing right now. I should be happy. And from that moment on, I was like, I'm all in, because
no more push-ups.
No more push-ups, but the whole thing was just,
and that
Kevin died, when he said, we only have one chance to do this right. So don't mess it up.
Can you remember those? We had like 3 or 4. They were like Ghostbusters. They had these packs on, but they were called Snow Business, and it was there. And they had 3 or 4 different types of snow, different composites of stuff, paper and things
plastic,
like that. Some would melt and crunch, and that was all part of layering up this aircraft hangar, which when you were in there, and then they would smoke up the place. The panorama was just the Ardennes. I mean, it was just incredible. I've been there. I've been where George was. And I remember having a deja vu moment because it felt like I'd been there. The art department were spectacular.
Amazing.
and you know, everything they did to kind of recreate was tremendous. But the only thing that the other thing that would give it away is when we would start to get into some kind of sequence and the weapons would start firing and we'd have these squibs going off, these explosions, there would be a slight echo because it was indoors, so that would give it away. But other than that, you were kind of caught up in the moment. But obviously, you know, the cold was the other thing. But you know, aside from that, there was that was what was great about the production and the budget, I guess. It allowed. I wouldn't have the audacity to. It wasn't anything close to what, you know, George was experiencing. But as an actor, trying to get into something, trying to connect to something, trying to, you know, sell a sequence. They did everything. The production were really, really good at being able to give us the conditions to try and do the best that we could. You know,
to truly believe what we're doing is what we're doing. Yeah, fully immerse ourselves.
Hi, my name's Joe.
Hey, Joe.
I was curious about two things. First question, how was it working with Hbo Budget? I feel like that was a very special thing, and that a budget made for a lot of realism that was able to connect. And then I guess my second question would be, Band of Brothers came out right before September 11th. How do you think the unification of that event helped with the spread of Band of Brothers?
Well, I'll take it because the budget affects the writers. You have to think about it and we were told just do whatever you want. There's nothing you can't write. We'll figure it out, which was great. You don't hear that very much in Hollywood. So, no, 9/11 was it changed. I mean, look, the show 9/11. The show premiered on a Sunday. The first review came out in the Wall Street Journal, and it was a scathing pan. Tom and Steven play G.I. Joes in their sandbox. It's a shitty show, excuse my French. It was a terrible review of Band of Brothers. The first review of Band was not good in the Wall Street Journal. 2 days later, 9/11 happened, and it changed everything because the country was at war, and you know, we were, of course, all worried about 9/11 first and foremost, but we were also, well, what is this going to do to the show? Is anybody going to want to watch a war show when we're at war? And the answer was yes, because people recognized, you know, and it became a different kind of experience for the viewer after 9/11, of what it meant to sacrifice, what it meant to serve together, what it meant to be an American in that kind of a context. And then the beauty of the Wall Street Journal review is the editorial. Somebody on the editorial page wrote an editorial taking their own writer to task, saying, "You suck," and this is brilliant, and we've never seen anything like this before. And you know, so then it changed the perception of the show. You know, when I got to Hollywood, I was told. The first script I ever wrote was another World War II script. I was told, don't ever write about World War II. It's dead in Hollywood. No one will ever do World War II again. That's the first thing I was told when I got there. And, you know, so I think 9/11 it was sort of a catalyst for re-examining the period. And Band, you know, it was lightning in a bottle in a lot of ways. But it did. It changed the way that people viewed the show. Does that answer your question? Go find that review. It's pretty funny.
All right. Hi again.
Hello.
I have a question for Mr. George. I hope I got that right. Hi. And I also have a question for the gentleman in the black shirt whose name I also forgot. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm terrible with names.
Chris.
Chris, thank you. Okay, so my first question is for George. As a World War II veteran, what is your most memorable moment being in the war? And then I also have a question for Chris. I see you have on the 101st Airborne shirt. And so my question is, did you serve in the 101st Airborne, and does it have anything to do with your grandfather?
Well, there are a lot of memorable moments, but one I guess that will stick with me forever was March the 25th of 1945, as we were assigned the job of taking part of the 87th Infantry across the Rhine River. To draw a little picture of this, we had 36 flat-bottom boats. Each boat would hold 8 infantrymen and 3 engineers, 2 engineers in the front, 1 in the back steering it. And we started across the Rhine at midnight on March the 25th. We got a third of the way across, and I'm in the back looking east, and a flare went up from the German side. I said, that's not good news. And it was not. We lost a lot of people that night crossing there. So that's not a good memory, but good memories were K-rations.
Good question. I wear a lot of 101st Airborne and Easy Company shirts. We have a reunion every year, and I design a T-shirt. So my everyday wear is something almost always with the 101st. I did not serve. My dad was in the Air Force. I was born in an Air Force base. When I graduated high school, I didn't think that I wanted somebody telling me what to do to that degree, so I went to college. In college, I watched the TV show Cops a lot, and made me want to be a cop. Took me a long time, but I am, at 35, I became a cop. I'm in Dallas. I'm Dallas Police. So I have a nice haircut that makes me look like a cop. I wear Oakley glasses that make me look like a cop. I usually wear Casio watch, tough watch makes me look like a cop. So even in off-duty, people tell me I look like a cop. But I like to think, and I believe in my heart, that I share Doc Rowe's DNA. And I surf like he did. I can't do blood. I'm sorry, I'm a crier. I'm a terrible crier. I can't do blood. And as a cop, that's people laugh at me, and my friends make fun of me. I was at a shooting last week, and one of my buddies sent a message on the computer. He goes, "How you doing with all that blood?" I go, he was still wearing a shirt, so it was just a bloody shirt. I didn't see anything. I could not have been a medic. I will either vomit or pass out or reverse those two, and then I'm the next patient for the EMS guys. So I have spent my career not going to blood and guts, but I believe that my grandfather's DNA runs through me, and I believe 100% that my protect and serve daily comes from him.
Hi, for George, and I have one for Chris too. For George, why do you think it's important for young people to learn about the Second World War and the events that you went through and all the people you know went through? And for Chris, what was it like to watch the episode about your dad for the first time? Or your grandfather, sorry.
Good question.
Well, World War II was the largest engagement that you can even think about. I mean, we've had Vietnam, we've had Korea, we've had all of that stuff, but really, to me, to get the scope of it, the 135 million people in the country and 16 million of them in the services, and these weren't soldiers, these were civilians, 80% of them, and all the wars, there have been wars and people been killed since then, and that's, but this one was different. Probably not since the Civil War have there been really that many civilians involved in warfare. And you're going to get some strange stories coming out of this, but this World War II museum here is doing its very best to preserve the true story of what went on in the early 1940s.
Man, y'all have some good questions. So again, what you kids won't understand is we didn't really have the internet back then. I didn't have a cell phone until I graduated college. But so I watched the episode with my grandfather. And of course, I knew nothing. We knew nothing about his service. So we were learning every Sunday night when an episode played, just like the rest of the world. And there's a scene where Shane is in a foxhole, either episode 6 or 7, and the shelling, I mean, it's just shelling and bombs and explosions, and people are screaming for medic. And Shane is in a foxhole, and he's laying down, the camera's looking at him, and it's like he's hesitated. He's hesitating. And I thought, they're showing my grandfather as a coward in battle. And I was so angry. I was furious. And so we jumped on these things called bulletin boards, which was just big text messages on the internet. Basically, we had nothing. And all these people just raving about this episode. And I'm like, did they not watch the same thing I just watched? They just showed my grandfather. And so HBO would play it again. And so I watched it again. And what I realized was it was actually a genius moment, because what it showed, and I got goosebumps, it showed a man in battle who had been in battle for a long time, who was a medic, who had seen all of his buddies hurt and killed, right? So that affects a man's heart and affects a man's head. Not to mention he's tired, he's freezing cold, he's hungry, he's thirsty. But what it showed was my grandfather in that case, sitting in a hole in the dirt, being shelled, men screaming for him. And he got up and went, which is the definition of courage, right? Courage is fighting through your fear and doing what needs to be done. It's the definition of courage. And so what it showed was what these men had, and that was courage, not lack of fear. I don't know George, but I think he'd be hard-pressed to say that those men were not afraid. When you cross the Rhine and the flare goes up, he was afraid. But moving forward is courage, and that's what that showed. So that was a great question. Yes, sir.
Hi, Harold. I was just wondering, for all the actors, like, how did it feel actually playing in a show that exemplified something so big as World War II? You know, like, did y'all learn a lot from it? Like, what'd you get out of actually seeing yourself in their shoes?
All right. It was surreal. I always say surreal just because I still think about it, and when I still watch the show and I see myself, I'm like, that's not me. I wasn't part of this. It's an out of body experience. When we were doing the show, we weren't thinking about it's World War II, because it wasn't like this thing that we know it as today. It was something that we were part of at that moment. So that mindset for me was just do what you have to do at that moment, because that is being true to who you are at that moment. And I think that's what made the show even more realistic and more standing the test of time, is that we all placed ourselves in those moments. It wasn't about like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be looked at if I do it this way? Is this my good side? Or no, it was just get from point A to point B, because that's what they did. There was never a time where, where's the camera? Because I want to look good. It was never that. It was just like, okay, like Shane, just get to that next foxhole where that soldier is hurt. Just do it. Just go there and get it done. Take care of that customer. Take care of that soldier and get to the next soldier. That's what you have to do. And that's what he did. And that's what we all did. You have to fire your weapon towards, the hedgerow over there, because that's where the enemy's at. You're not thinking about anything else other than what you had to do at that moment. And as an actor, you just wanted to make sure that you didn't mess up. That's it. I mean, there was a lot of times where we were like, before the shoots, we would go, okay, we'd have flags everywhere where, you know, we have the bombs going off, the mortars going off. So we knew exactly where things were at. You know, okay, so that's going to go off here, that's going to go off there. All right, cool. Come time to shoot, we have nothing there. And we're looking around going, do you remember where the mortars are? No. So, do you remember where you're going to go? Yeah. Just do that, you'll be fine. Roll.
It was.
And you don't know where the cameras are. I mean, there's like, sometimes there was 11 cameras rolling at the same time. I mean, it was nuts.
But,
you know?
But the education continues. I mean, that doesn't stop.
Exactly.
I mean, it was like, I quite like World War II history. I was a bit of a geeky school. I had a really good history teacher, you know, but I didn't know anything about Easy Company. I did. Were you pointing to this man as the same
awesome.
Cool teacher?
Yeah.
So doing the research, getting to do the show, and then getting involved with this museum. In fact, I mean, I've been very fortunate to be a guest. Nathan and his team they've invited me to follow in the footsteps of the Corcoran boots and go on the easy route. And I've been able to sort of consolidate everything. I've been able to sort of, that's what I was saying about those moments of being in the Ardennes or being on the Normandy beaches in Eindhoven and just having that deja vu experience, because the art department did a fantastic job. But just being and seeing how expansive, I know it's the clue's in the title, it's a world war, right? But it's just how vast this thing is, you know. And the stories are never ending. And there's always something, even in this story, there's always something new coming to light. And it's just fascinating. So in terms of just having we just went in as actors, but we came away and with a more rounded education. We had respect anyway for these men, but you know, it's profound respect now, and so it's, you know, it was more rewarding in more ways than one, for sure.
Good question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, maybe specifically for Mr. McKenna, but anybody really, because I was fortunate to have been a student of Dr. Ambrose, and I didn't know if any of you had met him and what that was like, talking with him.
Yeah, we met him early in the production, but he was sort of above our pay grade. He was with Stephen and Tom, but it was a great honor to meet him. And I'm also working with his son Hugh, who was a researcher for him, and it was great. He was a really interesting, fun guy, and you know, his commitment to keeping the memory of these veterans alive. He was very important for American culture, because he was the first guy to go out on a limb and do it, and really to push the narrative of that generation, and you know, so it was. And the book, and you know, working with the book, and being able to ask him questions if we wanted to. We didn't ask him a lot of questions, but you know, once the writers were hired, we went directly to the men. And the book is actually, when you read the book, it focuses a little bit more on the officers, and the series does. I mean, there's Nixon and Winters, but. You know, Winters was still alive, Nixon wasn't, so a lot of the writers, we spent a lot of time with the sergeants, with Garnier, with Toy, with, you know, and I spent a memorable weekend with them in Denver, where a lot of beer, and, you know, to talk to them, and then I would call them and tape them. I have hundreds of hours of tapes with the men. So the series changed a little bit from the book, a little bit, because we were able to talk to the men and get inside their heads, but that's because of the book. You know, it's a great book, and he was I think he was a really important historian. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah. She's nervous. So, Mr. George, this is a question from one of my students. They would like to know how long you served, when you were drafted. And then I have a secondary question for you, Mr. George. You fought Nazis. The rise of Nazism in today's culture, does that have an effect on you?
I didn't get the last part.
The rise of Nazism. did that have an effect on you? Does that have an effect on you? The thought of that. But the first one was how long you served. From
Yeah,
the draft.
well, I kept dodging the draft board until February of 1943. Went to basic training in Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. At the end of that, that was an engineer basic, and I was sent to join an outfit that had built over 300 miles of the Alcan Highway in 1942. The story behind the Alcan was that we were no longer comfortable with shipping in the Pacific Ocean, so we built a landway to get to Alaska, which at that time still, I guess, wasn't even a state yet. It was still a province. So I was in northern Canada the summer of 1943, came back to the States. Little side story, if you just like side stories. We were assigned to a camp in south central Oregon, and there's lots of stories come out of this. You guys got the rest of the day? I was at Camp White in Oregon, and after we'd been there about 3 or 4 weeks, we were told, load up on the trucks, we're going to Northern California. What are we going to Northern California for? Well, we're going to pick potatoes and onions. Well, I checked the engineer manual. It didn't say anything at all about onions. Funny thing about it is we get to the town of Tule Lake, California, maybe 500 people. 2 of them are my aunt and uncle. Not only are they my aunt and uncle, but they're the parents of one of Doolittle's raiders. We can just do history here just on top of one another. Anyway, after we finished getting the potatoes and onions picked up, really why? Because all the Japanese farm workers were in internment camps. So, if you're an engineer, you just go learn to do all kind of funny things. So anyway, we then went back to the camp in Oregon, and since most of the outfit had been up in northwest Canada building the Alcan Highway, they said, well, you guys probably need to take basic again. You've been out of the States for a year and a half. Well, of course, us new recruits had just finished basic. No difference. So we did that. We took basic. That lasted till Christmas time. Still got no assignment. They said, well, we could do basic again. Well, those of us who were new to the battalion now had finished basic 3 times within less than a year, and we're starting to get the hang of it. Anyway, finally, in April of 44, we were ordered to go, since you trained on the West Coast, you were going to ship out on the East Coast. So we went to Camp Shanks up the Hudson River from New York City, and were there until, well, Ike called me up and said he was going to invade France. I said, well, you go ahead without me. I'll be over in a little while. So we actually shipped out of New York the 1st of July, so 3.5 weeks after D-Day, and then landed in France early August, and were there from then until the end of the war in May of 45, at which time we were almost in Czechoslovakia. We had gone all the way from West Coast to East Coast. And so that was, then all you had to do is be careful they didn't send you to the Pacific where the war was still going on. But I told him, no, I've already got a brother and 3 cousins out there, so I'll just stay over here for a while.
Joe, what was your second question after the Nazism question?
My question was mostly, as someone who fought Nazi ideology, how is like a surge of Nazi ideology today affecting you? Does that question make sense?
The rise of today.
In your lifetime, you're seeing a rise of Nazi ideology twice.
So, Joe's question was about the rise of the Nazi ideology back in the day is one thing, but we're potentially seeing another rise in that today. And do you have any feelings about that or anything?
No, not really. No.
Don't worry about it. You don't have that. You don't have to answer it.
Well, he dealt with it once, you know.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our final question from the audience right over here.
This is a question for George. So being in an engineering battalion, what made what made you different? Did you see yourself different than a regular infantryman? And did that affect how you saw the war?
Well, the thing about engineers is there are a lot of different types of engineers. They're general service engineers, or construction battalions, and we were in what was actually called an engineer combat battalion, which meant that as they listed all the things we were supposed to do, the last one down there was serve as infantry if needed. And unfortunately, they needed it a couple of times. But actually, until the Battle of the Bulge, since Luxembourg and that part of Belgium were a quiet area, we had kind of reverted back to doing engineer sort of things. We ran sawmills, gravel rock crushers. We did a lot of road maintenance and whatnot. And all was going good until the 16th of December. A day to remember.
Good question. Okay, so for our panelists, if we could just get one last comment about your feelings on being a part of this series 20 years later.
Oh, gosh.
Rene, you start and work up.
All right. Still to this day, I'm just in awe of the series itself. I'm just honored to be a small part of it. It is amazing to think that, what it took for all of us to make this series, and we're all role players in this. It wasn't like we had all these stars coming in and doing this incredibly big, humongous project. It was all these basically unknown actors. We had Schwimmer, we had, Ron from, but other than that, if you look at everybody else, they were, not really well-known actors. And what made it special is that we all bought into it, and we all collectively wanted something that was gonna last, and we did. And it's just amazing to think that it still is an important part of our culture now, and which is really cool to think about, I just have so much respect for all these veterans. I have, it's humbled me in so many ways. I just look at all these gentlemen that I see, not every year, but when we get together, it's like we've never been apart. It's always this incredible brotherhood, that we have. And it's just an honor to be part of this. That's all I could say about it.
Well, it changed my life, the show, changed my career, but and all the privileges and honors, and it's a lot of fun, but really what it did for me and what I remember is being with the veterans.
Yeah.
And being able to honor their memory and tell their stories honestly, without judgment, and to get people like you, young people, to understand what it was like for them and to, forget us. We're just transmission belt for that man and his generation and what they did. Because what they did was extraordinary. And George, I'll buy you a drink when we get back to the hotel.
Like Bruce, it changed my life. It gave me a history of my family that I did not know existed. And out of my family, I'm by far the most active in anything associated with Band of Brothers. To the point where, not being a cliche, it's really a part of my daily life. I don't get a tattoo, you're too young, but when you're able to get a tattoo, I have the Paradise patch tattooed on my shoulder blade, so I literally every day see that patch, and it reminds me of these guys. When we started losing the veterans, the Dick Winters and the Bill and Babe and the Compton and the Malarkeys, not only were those guys stalwarts of Easy Company, they shared one thing in common, and they all went to schools and spoke to kids like you guys. And so that inspired me to want to try to fill that gap in some way. And I wrote a book in 2018, and I retold the story. And my main goal was to reach students and let them know that these guys existed and what they did, so that they would not be forgotten, and you would understand the sacrifice and the courage and then the love of country that these men have. And that we can't lose that. And so my passion has been to reach kids and remind everyone that we live under the freedom that these guys helped give us. So it changed my life. These guys are a daily part of my lives. I think about them all the time.
Yeah, and I'm not going to add too much in terms of, it's not really any different from the way I see things. I just think it's, we were lucky. We were very lucky to be in something like that, and the legacy. It's another way of just honouring the memory. It's a great way in for your generation. Not everybody likes to read. It's a nice thing to see, and as a starting point, and it just. I think the proudest thing is that it keeps on giving. As the years tick on, it's still relevant, and it's still as it should be. And it's a great resource, and I think, to be a part, to be a part of that. My own legacy of obviously, Chris is one of my dear friends now, and for something like that to come out of this as well on a personal level, has been fabulous, and that's the gift that keeps on giving. So, I'm very, very, very proud of what we managed to do for people like George.
And George, our man of the hour, any final thought from you?
Let us all be thankful for this museum, who has dedicated to keeping the story straight in spite of all the efforts by other organizations to try to distort it. This is the story of World War II, the greatest concentration of people in battle in history, and keep supporting this museum. They're dedicated to getting the story straight and getting it out. Thank you.
All right, well, students, teachers, everyone, thank you for attending. I hope it was a very worthwhile program for you to get to know these actors, writers, and of course, George. Your blue wristbands that you've received give you admission to the museum for as long as your teachers will allow you to stay. So as you depart the auditorium, your teachers may want to give you some instructions here, but Chrissy and Kelly will be helping direct you out of here once you're ready with your student groups. And one more time, thank you to our panelists and for your work and keeping the legacy.
Thank you guys very much.